Okay, so welcome to the Big Blue Workshop. Today we are working on our pit stop challenge. This is a 6-foot long plywood car that we're actually going to let the boys take the tires on and off of at their Pinewood Derby race for the DFW Indian Guides. So this will be kind of fun. The idea here, we want it to be mobile, we want it to be lightweight, but we want it to be stable so the boys can actually remove the wheels and not pull the whole thing over. So we're going to get started, see what you think.
So here's a picture of the finished product so you know where we're going to end up. I had to start by coming up with a way to do lug nuts. I polished the end of some 5/8 hex bolts and rigged them so they would spin freely at the end. I originally put a nail on the end to keep them from falling off and decided that I thought it'd be more fun for the boys to take them off and put them back on, so I changed that design. This was a test run that I did just to make sure that they would spin freely and spin right back on, and it seemed to work pretty good with an impact driver. I was actually able to take a 4.5-inch angle grinder and polish these ends down. I ground the threads off using a 4.5-inch flap wheel on a Metabo cordless grinder. What that allowed me to do was ultimately spin the nut onto the end of the threaded rod without having to really find the threads. You can just kind of slide it on there and spin it, and that makes it easier for the kids to do this as a game. Note, this is not the safety video of the year. I would recommend wearing long pants, long sleeves, and gloves when doing this application. You'll notice I am wearing safety glasses. The best option there would be a face shield, but do as I say, not as I do. So I added this next part just so you could see. I drilled holes in the ends of these things using a cutting oil and a high-speed drill bit, but I ended up not using them. So this is the finished product on the lug nuts. In order to get this thing cut out, I actually shot a picture with an overhead projector onto a piece of plywood and then traced it with a Sharpie and then cut it out with a jigsaw. That ended up giving me a pretty accurate representation. To do the wheels, I didn't have a lot of scrap left to make fully round wheels, so I actually made the wheels out of the scrap wood in half moon pieces and then glued them to the two circles that I was actually able to cut out of the scrap. Looking back, I probably should have spent the $40 and bought another piece of plywood. I ended up using my router table with a pretty good sized roundover bit. I rounded over the front and the back of each one of the wheels. The reason I did the wheels out of plywood was because 5- and 6-year-old kids are going to be using this and they can't really lift even something as small as a trailer tire. So it also allowed me to get the proportions right on the car. I used that same scrap lumber to make my fender wells. I was just able to cut the pieces large enough to fit on the car, and once I got them all glued together, I screwed them together with construction screws, or the same screws I use for pocket holes. I took the kind of ragged edges of them and just knocked them down with a jigsaw when I was done. Painted it with flat black paint, and it looked pretty clean once all was said and done. So here's the fender wells once I got them installed. They ended up being pretty clean. I fit the tires to it and went to work making the hubs for the wheels. I made a template out of a piece of MDF so that I could drill all my holes in the same spot. I used 3 pieces of plywood. 2 of them sandwiched the head of the hex bolt between them so that it wouldn't spin when the kids were trying to put the lug nuts on and off. And then the third one was just for spacing on the car to stand it out far enough away from the car to be able to work with it. Note the PVC pipe that's wrapped around the lug nuts helped me to keep from over tightening the lug nuts once they were put on the car. I made the base of the unit out of 2x4s and 2x2s. I just angled them and rigged them so they could be put together pretty simply with with wood screws and carriage bolts. I actually assembled the main parts with wood screws, but I decided that it needed to be able to be taken apart with carriage bolts and wing nuts, so I just used some 1/4-inch carriage bolts. This has to be stored with the Pinewood Derby equipment in a storage room all year, so the more I can make it flat, the easier it is to store. Originally, you can see me putting wood screws in here, but I replaced those with carriage bolts later. In order to actually install this, I mounted a small piece of plywood the height I wanted so that I could get it up off the ground. I fastened it with wood screws originally, and again went back and put carriage bolts and wing nuts on the back of it. I started painting it with a Rust-Oleum oil-based paint with a brush. I figured that trying to tape it all off and spray it would just cause all kinds of bleed, and I just didn't want that to happen, so it was a little bit easier for me to do this. And once I got that done, I was real happy with how that worked out, except for the glass. I painted the glass with a silver metallic, and looking back at it, I probably should have just used a flat gray or just a gloss gray, because that silver metallic just doesn't spread well with a brush. I ended up actually printing the numbers and the logos on paper. The final product, they were printed onto glossy photo paper, so the whole car had a glossy finish to it. I painted the wheels white, and then I took letters and put them on the wheels and painted over it with black, so I'd have that white letter look. I just removed the letters with a razor knife and cleaned them up with a small brush, and the finished product looked okay. I ended up using a semi-gloss black in the fender wells. That kind of cleaned up any imperfections. And then I used black electrical tape to mask off the white pinstriping, because it would bend a little bit easier than typical masking tape would. And here's the rough product before I went to putting all the logos on. The finished product had the photo paper and all the logos, and the silver brake discs on it. The kids at the Pinewood Derby had a ball playing with it. You can see with the donut in one hand, the drill in the other. The boys really enjoyed it. If you like this, please subscribe. Have a great day.